Hi, hello everybody and welcome. I'm Suzanne and I'm MD of Sequel Group, and great to see you. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be having a look at how internal comms and IT teams can work together to achieve great digital transformation results. I know I personally have often been quite frustrated by my colleagues in IT, not here at Sequel, I hasten to add, but working with different clients. Sometimes it can feel like they're talking a different language, and how perhaps you're an IT specialist as well and don't really understand how comms works. So we're really honoured today to have Joanna Poplawska here to talk with us. And what Joanna's going to do is just talk us through her insights on what makes a great relationship and what advice can she offer to communicators and how we can really best work with IT to make the best of the relationship, because it's a really important relationship. So welcome, Joanna.
Thank you very much for having me here this morning. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Good. So first of all, what I want to find out is tell us a little bit about yourself, your career and your background.
I'm CEO of Collaboration, Innovation and Technology Forum. And I think the best way to describe us is that we are a membership club for technology and IT teams across different organizations, different industries, different sectors. We have about 4,000 members, and they come from very different IT and technology functions. They are diverse in terms of their gender, their geographical locations, the seniority, the types of responsibilities they have. So when I started working for CITF 11 years ago, since then, I communicate with IT and technology every day of my working life. And it was a challenge at the beginning, I have to say, because I'm non-technologist myself. I did law and then Islamic studies. So technical jargon was not something that I was really familiar with. And also, as a non-native English speaker, there was another challenge of entering the whole sphere of communicating in a language which is different from your native language. So considering all of these challenges, I'm here today and I will share my experiences and what IT and technology can do better to communicate better with the business. Because as we spoke before with Nick Andrews, is that if I would be paid for every comment that I hear from IT and technology, that business doesn't understand them and how difficult it is to communicate with the business, I would be a very rich woman now.
We could run off together to Barbados and spend the money, perhaps. So can you tell us a little bit about the CITF? Because I'm aware, some of our delegates may not have heard of them before.
Yes, well, we've been around for quite some time, for 27 years. And the organization was initially set up as Technical Infrastructure Forum. And the change of the name, Collaboration, Innovation and Technology Forum, I think reflects the change in IT and technology and how our members see their contributions to the business as well. Our services really are based on one guiding principle. It's all about exchanging information, practical experiences, and expertise amongst peers. And we do it in different ways, from having mentoring schemes to providing platform for online events, special interest group, library of resources. So there's lots of services that enable our members to share what they would like to share on the kind of most critical for them topics at the moment.
Yeah, so your members, just fill me in really, kind of who are your members? Who do they tend to be?
Oh, they tend to be large organizations, so but very different in a sense of the industry. So, for example, we have cancer research, and we have as member organizations BAE Systems. We'll have News UK, people behind the Times and the Sun, but we also have Imperial College. So it is very, very different. They have things in common, and usually IT and technology challenges are shared among these organizations. It's, people face the same challenges. They approach them in different ways depending on organizational culture. And I think that's the interesting aspect of it. What can you learn from other organizations that sit in a completely different industries? How can you expand your thinking? How you can be more innovative? How you can approach your daily problems in a different way? And that's what we really want to focus on.
And that leads us really nicely onto my next question, because I know that you're passionate about communication and the value of communication, especially in the IT industry, and the need for IT professionals at all levels to have those really good communication skills. Why do you believe that's so important?
Well, let's just think what's happening now. Yes, so at the moment, what is happening? I'm planting some seeds in our wonderful audience brains this morning. Yes, I'm planting my thoughts and my ideas and my knowledge in people's brains without using open brain surgery, without using any tools, just by using my words, sounds in that case, yes. And I think this is just amazing capability that we have as human beings to be able to communicate. And we usually communicate because we want to persuade others to do something. And persuasion is really critical in business and also in our personal life. So when we think about it, we persuade our colleagues to support us with our projects. We persuade our bosses to give us money to be able to deliver the project. We persuade our customers to buy our services and products. But persuasion, I think, considering how critical it is for business, is still very much undervalued. And I think it's very difficult for technologists not only persuade the business, but more importantly, to inspire business about technology and IT. And I think very often it is because the way technologies present is very much based on the rationale. It's a very intellectual process, and we can see it how that's expressed in PowerPoint slides. Yes, we have our facts, we have our figures, we have some quotes, and then off we go to a team meeting trying to convince people that we need to invest in this particular framework. And I think that skill, although important, it's based only that this persuasion then only happens on this very rational level. And we as human beings need emotion. We need inspiration. And I think that's why it becomes more difficult. And storytelling now, we know about it. People talk a lot about storytelling skills, but it's hard. As a skill, it's actually quite hard to be good at, to get the story that really reflects what we want to achieve. I think it's very hard, and there's lots of work that has to be done. And I think people undermine how difficult actually is to communicate clearly.
Yeah. It's something we see a lot in our business and working with clients, is that often, line managers, they're made a line manager because they are great at the job they do. They're not often great at communications as well. And that brings me on to, so, many of your members or organizations they represent, do they value communication as well? Do they have the same emphasis?
It's really interesting, because I can tell you that every time when I talk to the CIO or any member of the technology leadership team, and I ask them, what we as organizations should focus on in terms of supporting our members, the answer is always communication skills. Always. But when we talk to people outside leadership team, I think there's a natural tendency to actually overestimate our own ability to communicate. And I think, many people feel that they are very good communicators and get frustrated if, the counterparts do not understand technology. And I think, very often advanced technology is complex. And I think to explain the complexity of technology in a way that it's really understood by the audiences is a skill. And I think it's definitely undervalued by people who feel that, oh, I don't have time for that, I'm pressed here, I need to deliver this project. But it's definitely seen as a priority at the top level of the organization.
Okay. So, why then do some IT departments or individuals, why do they just not get comms? Is it their personalities or organizational indifference?
It's a very interesting question. Yes, why don't we get something? And I do think that I think we generally probably as a society as we are now in 2021, we are still not very good at communicating. And now communication obviously has this added layer of communicating digitally, non-verbally, and, becomes actually more and more complex. Digital body language, digital messages, and at the same time, face-to-face communication. So actually, all of that becomes more complex and more important. And I do think that we just don't spend enough time to get better. It takes time to explain complexity of something. It takes time to craft your story, to inspire your audience. It takes time. And it seems at the moment that we're all in such a rush that we don't have time to do anything. And we just use this quick communications. But then later on, when the project fails, I have to say in our experiences, what we can see across member organizations, it usually fails due to poor communication.
Interesting. And yet in so many organizations, that communication is seen as that soft skill that, well, everybody can actually do it. Yes.
And I think we need to change this description. Yes, we have to stop talking about soft skills. And I think talking about communication being critical skills. And I think there's so much that can be done, starting from the educational system. When we think, are our children actually educated how to communicate effectively? When we think about secondary school, universities, and then entering workplace, is communication training first thing that we offer our graduates? Probably not. So I think that actually can be a lot done, even in terms of formal and practical education as well.
Yeah, you're right. It needs to start a lot earlier rather than it just being an assumed skill. Yeah. Sure. So do you see, as you mentioned, the last 18 months has kind of thrown everything up in the air. So do you see the situation changing really as those lines between internal comms and technology become blurred?
I think it's really obviously the digital transformation happening across all of our member organizations. I think there's lots of conversations and debates, as we thought about earlier, for digital transformation, how that works. Yes, is it the CIO? Is it the CMO? Is it the CEO? And I think, personally, when we think about this debate, I think it needs to stop because the only way, we can go forward with digital is to really understand that it lies somewhere between. Yes, it lies somewhere between IT and digital and business leadership, because traditionally IT needs to support, all the frameworks which are needed to do digital transformation, and the comms need to support the engagement and understanding of the project. So it has to be seen as a common goal. Is it easier now? Is it getting easier? Not sure. I think we have some successful examples of fantastic collaboration, but I also think that at the moment people are under enormous pressure to deliver very quickly, and I think there's a cost associated with it. With actually communication again, being pushed back, and we can deal with it a little bit later.
So who should own? You talk about the projects and there being a mix. Somebody somewhere has to own these type of projects. So is it internal comms or is it IT?
You see, I don't know. I think I don't know. I think really depends, but on the culture of the organization, because there's no clear-cut answer to that. Yes, there's no, and I think this conversation happens at every level of the organization as we go. But the truth is, and that's something that I think IT and technology leadership really understands now, that they are business leadership. Yes, they need to also communicate with the business, and they need to be part of the business. And I think that's really important to for IT and technology to fight for this seat at the table in that respect. But I think that also depends very often on the organizational culture. And I could see in many organizations still IT and technology being perceived as just delivery mechanism of things. And I don't think that's particularly forward thinking. I think that IT and technology is business. And I think we have this conversation again with our members, and they very clearly understand and want to be part of that discussion.
Yeah. And I'm interested as well in our people on the call, just to say, if you have any questions at all, then please do pop them into the chat, and I'll pick those up in a few minutes. So while we wait for those questions to come, I'd like to know what can comms professionals do to get our IT colleagues on side?
I think that this is, when I thought about communications, and I think that works both ways. So there should be no story without numbers, and no numbers without a story. And I think this principle, this principle should apply to both sides. and I think that considering that IT and technologies, although that changes as well, we can see the whole influx of people who come from non-technology backgrounds into IT and technology. And I think those people often come with a different attitude to the way they present and express themselves. But I think it's important also from the perspective of IT and technology that truly from the internal comms perspective, that the requirements are clearly defined, and they also are part of this conversation. So I think, as we all know, is communication works both ways. Both parties have to make an effort to be understood clearly, rather than put the blame on the others. And IT and technology are very data focused because of the nature of their work. And I think because of that, I think it's also a certain degree of skepticism sometimes. When we think about PR, I think specifically, we tend to have very rosy pictures of things that are happening internally within organizations. But IT and technology, and probably other functions as well, they know very well that actually, despite of the fantastic statements of increased sales and future prospects, actually reality is much harder. And I think this certain degree of honesty and trust and openness and transparency would be also very welcomed.
So how can internal comms people, how can we do more or do better to really collaborate or engage with IT?
I do think that first question, with anything about communications, people tend to tell others everything they know. And I think sometimes, ironically, people talk too much because they don't listen well. And I think that applies again to both parties. So I would say, listen, but if you do not understand technical jargon, and I think sometimes using technical jargon is actually a defense mechanism for some people. Yes, it's kind of, and just ask question. And I did it, and I still do it, yes, being non-technologist. And obviously we deliver services to member organizations, but we do not know all the details of the internal structures. So I would just say, ask the question and, demand answers and ask until it's all clear. And if the jargon is used, I think you just have to raise this issue and say, okay, actually, this is not, that's not working for me. Could you please tell me and explain that in the terms that I can understand? So I think, the kind of challenging people, the way they communicate, and also making an effort ourselves to be clearer and to spend more time, I would say time, yes, to prepare for this conversation. Because even when we think about coming to a meeting with our wonderful PowerPoint slides, with our facts and figures and numbers, the truth is that our audience have their own set of numbers and figures and experiences in their brains. Yes, so we start immediately from the position that we have to convince and challenge them, and that's not easy. So I would say just prepare.
And I know myself that, when I've had, say, difficulty in understanding something, I've even resorted to saying, could you just draw it out for me? Just sketch it out, because then that helps me enormously to think, so that's connected to that. Yeah, it does. And I think from what I take from what you say, Joanna, is we mustn't be afraid as communicators to say, no, I'm really sorry, I still haven't got it. Could you explain it again to me?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the same probably works for IT and technology, that, very often they do not ask the questions. And then, we have those complaints about, I don't know what business wants from me. Yes. And I would say, well, again, the kind of appeal that we say to technologists, ask the question. So I think, this, and it's purely on our, we're all humans. We all, have our insecurities. We worry about our jobs. We worry about how we look. But actually, long term, I think, it's absolutely better for us long term to admit in the first place we do not understand something and we need more time and more help and support with it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm interested to know, do you have any examples of great collaboration between comms and IT that you can share with us?
So, I thought about it actually when I was preparing for this conversation, and we run every year, we run this program that actually SQL very kindly supported us with, Real IT Awards. And the categories, there are all different categories that organizations enter. And when I think about winners of these awards, regardless if that's innovation or is it the project category, they all have the same thing in common. They really work across different stakeholders, and communication is a very important part of that. And actually, when our judges, who are completely independent, and we have independent judging panel, score these submissions, communications is put as one of the deciding factors to be awarded the award. And we had, even this year in May, when we had our ceremony, we had some fantastic examples of those. Just recently, we had a webinar of one of our winners, Virgin Atlantic, when they had a great example of collaboration between different business functions. And I think the same goes for all of our winners. Those who are winning those awards really understand the value of communication within the organizations.
Interesting. And one of the things I hear quite a lot about is that I believe it was last year was the first year we had 5 generations of people working in the workplace, and that just blows my mind. And I'm just interested really in your view on, so these new kind of more digital natives coming in who may well be communicators, do you think the industry will that be a benefit to the industry? Will there be a good change?
I think it will be well, we all as a society, we keep changing all the time. Yes. And I think that what will be really interesting to see is the impact of hybrid workplace, impact of very diverse workforce on communications. Yes, and I think we are at this really, exciting time in a way to see how we're going to communicate in the future, and what is going to survive and what's going to be left behind as the method that doesn't work. And our membership is very diverse, and we try to accommodate many different ways of communicating, but it's hard. Yes, it's because you try, okay, we have some things for people to read, some things for people to listen to, some people to watch, some short forms, some long forms. All of that, yes, becomes actually more and more complex. And it will be great to see if the different ways of communicating, and we have lots of experts, I'm sure, in the audience, and I'm sure you're looking at that, is what is going to be, is there going to be one most effective method of communicating, or are we going to stick to this really diverse model of communications, or will that change again? I think, for me, even working internally with my team, when we went on completely in a complete remote working environment, is how much emphasis we had to put on communications to be effective as a business. Yeah. And there are, we go for abbreviating communications because of the types of tools we use. We have Slack, we have Teams, we have Zoom, and all of that. But actually, every word matters. And I really, I keep saying that to IT and technology, really for people to appreciate the power of words and the power of communications. And I'll give you one example. And it was, everyone thinks they're a great communicator. I was on the conference, online conference, with one of my team members. We were watching Michelle Obama giving a private interview about diversity and inclusion. And I made certain assumptions. I assumed that my team member is listening to the interview exactly at the same time as we would be in a live audience. In fact, she recorded the webinar and she wasn't listening to it at the same time as I did. So at some point, Michelle Obama said that Black women at workplace want to be seen. My employee is a Black woman, so I sent her a text message saying, I can see you, ! Assuming that she understands what I'm trying to say. And of course, I got the text back, absolutely puzzled. I'm at my desk, what have I done wrong? So, and that shows, how important it is to actually really think before doing and communicating anything. And we tend to, and now obviously with all the digital things, it's very difficult to judge somebody's tone of voice. 3 exclamation marks are the sign of excitement or are the sign of skepticism and irony. It becomes, I think at the moment it's really complex, and I think we just have to keep talking about communications and highlighting all those challenges that we all have in order to move on and get better.
Yeah, and I have a question, and that is, so from the other side, so as communicators, how can we keep up with this ever-changing landscape of change, and especially in technology?
Well, that's a very good question. And, I ask myself this question, I think, every day, and I think we just have to do our best. That's the only advice I can give, because we will never be able to keep up with everything. Yes, and we just have to give ourselves some slack as well. And it's very difficult. And I think technology also becomes more and more specialized in a way, and more complex every day. And we can't be expert on everything. So I think let's just try. I think, for me, it's always I try to understand why rather than how and what. And I think the moment we understand why, then it's easier to put this bigger picture together. And I have now, after all these years, I have genuine interest in technology, and it still excites me. And I think, the best advice would be just find the bits that really excite you, because through that, you probably get a better understanding of technology as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I think looking at the clock, I think we're kind of out of time. But I just want to say it's been fascinating because I think it's such an important time for communicators and people who understand technology to work closer together. That it's just been great to see how we might be able to build a few bridges and some really practical tips. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you very much. Thank you.